Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I'm bringing you week 22 of my 2019 reads. This week I had an absolutely awful cold, but even so I managed to finish 2 books from my May TBR. The first book that I finished this week was The Black Tides of Heaven by J.Y. Yang, which I really enjoyed. I thought that the world building in particular was fantastic. This is a silk punk world, so sort of like steampunk, but takes place in East Asia and builds in a lot of Asian culture and mythology to make it just this absolutely fantastic world. There's a big focus on the magic system in this world, which uses the 5 elements, earth, air, things like that. But also there's a lot of technical advancements, things like guns and a lot of weapons. This story has a strong political focus, and I don't know a ton about East Asian history, but I know a little, and I could see some of that reflected in this story. For example, the leaders of this world have very Japanese sounding names, and Japan is known for having invaded and conquered a lot of East Asian countries. It's also sort of a brutal regime, which again mirrors some of what actual history happened. So I thought those were very fascinating aspects to this story. The storyline itself follows a pair of twins who grow up in a monastery, and they are the children of the leader of this world, and they have to sort of decide what their path is. Are they going to follow in their mother's footsteps, or are they going to try to create some sort of new world order? And those choices also kind of come along at the same time as very personal choices. This story really explores a lot of gender and sexuality issues, which makes sense because I think that J.Y. Yang is also queer. And the world has this idea that until you're an adult, you don't choose your gender. So all children are gender neutral, like physically they are gender neutral. And then they become confirmed when they are ready as adults to one gender or the other. And so there's a lot of really interesting exploration of, what it means to make those sort of personal choices and decide who you will be, both in terms of who you will be physically as well as who you will be politically, who you will be in terms of following your destiny or not. And that really ties into the title. The Black Tides of Heaven is from this quote about humanity being swept along with these waves of fate, and whether you're going to just let yourself be buffeted by that and flow along with it, or if you're going to swim against the current and try to make your own way. So I thought that those aspects were really good in the story. I think that the story towards the end was also just super gripping. I mean, things just really pulled together and made a very fascinating, fast-paced ending. But there were times in the beginning and in the middle that felt a little, I don't know, bird's eye view. I didn't feel as connected to the characters or to the story, and just sort of felt like I was waiting for things to happen, almost like it was just set up. So I didn't connect as strongly with the characters and even the plot in the first part of the story, but the second part I really, really did, and the world building more than made up for any of that kind of lack of connection in the beginning. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and I will definitely continue with the series. The other book that I finished this week was Ninefox Gambit by Yoon Lee, which was another really great read that had amazing world building. This is a military science fiction, but it has really fascinating technology, which is based on religious beliefs. So in this universe, there are extremely advanced technological societies, spaceships, grand weapons, robots, all these things, but they derive their technological power from religious beliefs, from the belief strength that the community has in their religious calendar. And this is just such a fascinating way to build your world. It's a very unique aspect of Yoon Lee's work. It also is very fascinating because Yoon Lee talks a lot, the characters talk a lot about games. There's a big focus on games and strategies and learning through games, and they make this analogy at some point about how when you are playing a game that has certain rules, you, by agreeing to believe in those rules, almost empower those rules to be real, because now everybody follows them, and that's how the universe works when you're playing that game, is that those rules become real through belief. And so that sort of analogy to the way that we make games have their own rules become reality sort of plays out in this grand epic scale of the way that technology itself is powered through belief systems. And this means that people having different beliefs can be very detrimental to your society, because that can make everything stop working, which means that religious beliefs become a very big priority. And so the storyline follows a captain in the army, Cheris, who is sort of not a very high, powerful captain. She's just kind of a regular infantry captain, but she is selected to embody the spirit of a past very brilliant but rather crazy general, Jadao. And the story follows them as they are tasked with fighting against some group of people who believe in a very different calendar system. And those people have taken over one of the starship bases, and they need to fight against them. But in fighting against them, there's also a big weakness, because simply getting in proximity to them and their different belief system weakens their own technology. And so they have to be very strategic and figure out how they can win this war. So this story was just fascinating on so many levels. There was all of this great political intrigue, military strategy, war mechanics, spaceship battles. There was just so much. It was really, truly epic. But what made it absolutely just so good on so many levels was all of the other things that it addressed. So this story addressed a lot of issues of what does it mean to believe? What does it mean to be in a military or to be in a government where you're following orders, even if you don't think that they're the right ones? Should you be acting against those, or should you go along with them? A lot of questions of, when you have a goal in mind, do the ends justify the means? Is it okay, in order to win a big war, for a lot of innocents to die, or is that not something that you should allow to happen? There's also a lot of questions about kind of personal integrity and issues of your own identity, who you are, who you identify with, who you belong to. Because Cheris embodies this general spirit, we have her struggling often between, his thoughts and her thoughts and how those work together. This book also really explored a lot of interesting gender and sexuality issues. Yoon Lee is a trans man, and I think that experience comes through a lot in that experience that Cheris and Jadao have, just sort of this being male, being female at the same time. One of the things I thought was really cool about this, though, was that in many cases, femininity, masculinity, and sexuality were very fluid for many of the characters, and that was considered a very normal part of the world. So Cheris, for example, usually would have relationships with women, and that was just sort of background information. There wasn't really anything big made out of that. And that normalcy of the fluidity of gender and of sexuality was a really nice, refreshing thing to read about. But the political intrigue and also often the bureaucracy, the strategizing, these layers of the story made it really fascinating, and I am super excited to read the rest of this series as well. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars, and I highly recommend it to anybody who hasn't picked it up yet. Okay, so that wraps up week 22 for me. If you guys have read either of these books, please let me know in the comments down below what you thought, and I will see you next week.